Hi, good afternoon. My name is Vince Cañete. But before I start, I want to know how many of you have watched the Olympics lately? Okay, so that's very few, kind of what I was expecting, not really professor. But for those of you who raised your hands, you might be interested to know, well, not really, sorry. You might be interested to know that the recent news that the organization has decided to include competitive gaming into the Olympic events, and it will be implemented in the Asian Olympics in 2022. Now, this news has actually recently created debate on whether this would actually be good for the organization as a whole and whether this was a wise decision. And today, I am here to argue that esports will increase engagement in the younger generation of viewers, leading to a profit for the organization. And I will do this through two claims. One, it will increase expand the viewership towards the younger generation. And two, explain how the revenue would work in funding for the organization. And before going to my claims, I want to explain two terms. One would be the compendium system. It was introduced in 2013 by a gaming company called Valve, in which they introduced a virtual book that cost $10, which allowed players special items and access during tournaments. And 25% of the $10 goes towards funding a prize money for the players in the tournament. And the rest of the 75% goes towards the company. And the second one would be the Major League Gaming. It is an organization which pioneered the competitive gaming industry, and is the most recognized brand in esports. Now, on my first point, esports will expand viewership in the younger generation. And let me first explain why this is important. Recently, when I asked you that how many of you have seen Olympics lately, not a lot of you raised your hand, and that has been reflected in the statistics from the ratings of NBC's viewership, in which they stated that people aged around 18 to 49 are 8.6% less likely to watch the Olympics compared to 2014. And this was similarly reflected during the Sochi Olympics, but in a larger number, in 24%. This contrasts to the growing number of viewers in the esports industry. And one of the highest numbers I've seen would be in October 2015, in which Mike Sepso, the co-founder of the Major League Gaming organization, announced that in that year alone, 225 million viewers have been watching the tournaments all year round. And for live events, it has been closing the gap when it comes to traditional sports, and in which 2014, the League of Legends World Cup held at Sangam in South Korea. The event had over 45,000 fans in attendance, live watching, and more than millions of viewers watching online. For my second point, I want to explain how the revenue from the tournaments would help the Olympics organization. And it does this in one of two ways, two possible ways, in which it could use crowdfunding or franchising. In the first point, crowdfunding would be in the form of the online participation of players and fans worldwide. And an example of this comes from the compendium system, which was introduced by Valve for the game Dota 2. The tournament was the International, held at 2017. And with the compendium system selling $10 and 25% going through the proceeds of the prize pool, the total amount of the tournament in 2017 amounted to $23,325,687. That means another 75%, which is roughly around 80 million, would be going to the company. This does not only reflect the amount of money and profit that the company goes through. This also translates how much dedication and passion there is for the fans and viewers. And this could be translated, if done correctly, by the Olympics during its events. Seeking a more stable method, we would be looking at a recent movement that has been gaining traction in the past 2 years. It would be the franchising of esports. In this case, it would work in a similar fashion to the NBA, in which the companies would gain money from advertising and sponsorships for the price of a spot in the league. And we see people invest this quickly with big names including Rick Fox, Shaquille O'Neal, and Peter Guber, who, if you didn't know, was the co-owner of the Golden State Warriors, buying a league spot in Overwatch for $20 million. And current negotiations for this season ranges from $30 million to $60 million for one of the 12 spots available. These ways are what constitutes revenue for the Olympics, and this is how I believe that the esports would increase the viewership and engagement of the younger viewers in the future. Thank you.
All right, Vince, the audience survey at the beginning is okay to get kind of people in and kind of identify what the subject is. Your propositional statement does finally show up after you kind of introduce the idea of the Olympics. I didn't really hear much information about the Olympics except that there was one session where you said viewership was down 8.6% in a particular category. And other than that, I don't know how desperate the Olympics are to expand their base or find additional viewers. There is also an assumption that the people who are viewers of esports are not already viewers of the Olympics. I'm not sure how true that is. If you could show that, for instance, there tends not to be much overlap in the interest, then I would suggest bringing esports into the Olympics is going to make a difference. But if there's already a lot of overlap, I'm not sure how much difference it's going to make. And that's kind of a presupposition that you've got here that I think you need some data on. There is a preview about what the supporting points are going to be. The first one is a claim. The second one really sounds like it's an informative statement as opposed to an argument. The first one is that esports will expand viewership, and that's where you get the information about what the ratings are. You talk about what the current viewership is for some of the esports activities that are online, and I think that that does demonstrate that there is some demand for this. The notion that it's going to expand as a result of being in the Olympics, I think, is again an assumption. Why would more people watch other events in the Olympics because they're watching the esports? I guess you're just adding to the pool. To me, if I was the esports companies that were sharing this, it seems to me like you'd be splitting your revenue with a group that only benefits from your presence as opposed to keeping the money for yourself because this is going so well for you. you have to kind of show that there's a synergistic benefit probably to both groups from allowing this thing to happen. And this is kind of a prediction about what's going to happen in the future since esports are going to be included in 2022. Did you say it was, I think? Yeah, so, and by the way, I don't know if that's a test thing or if it's going to be a long-term thing. Olympics often do test sports one time to see how it works. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be a permanent fixture there, and I don't know which category this fits into. The second point is a little bit more problematic because it really seems like you're talking about how they fund the current esports. There's not really any discussion of what the Olympics funding mechanisms are, how they get their money, whether or not their revenues are down, whether or not additional viewers is going to increase the amount of money that they would get. We don't really have any discussion of that. This whole compendium system that you're talking about is explained, and I'm not exactly sure why. I'm thinking this is a pretty good deal for the companies. They get 3/4 of the money that they raise for these tournaments by selling this electronic book. And don't they already get money for selling the games and providing that resource or promoting in-game purchases and that sort of thing? This sounds like it's a windfall for the companies as opposed to something that's really beneficial to either the franchising of the sport or developing it as an Olympic sport. So I think that there's maybe a little bit of a problem there. The idea that we could franchise the sports, I don't see how that's related to the Olympics argument, which is really your main claim. If there is some reason to believe that the Olympics would increase the franchising and that's a benefit of that, then maybe that's the way that argument fits in there. All right, thank you.